rabbits of white whiskers had sent their most agile warrior. It would take more than a hop and a skip to overcome the formidable gray ears. Put up a hearty challenge, but his grand hops were no match for Redgi's iron will. Captain Blacktail, a treacherous pirate, notorious for his adventures across the three seas. Redgi wondered if he was as fearsome on land. Scurvy sea rat put up a good fight, but Redgi thought the captain might be better off sticking to the ocean. Dennis had returned with a vengeance, fully armed to the whiskers. He'd already lost one tournament and was determined he wouldn't lose another. Once again felt the bitterness of defeat at his younger brother's paws. Was an old ally of King Rattus. Side by side, the pair had fought frog scum together many times. Would Redgi live up to his father? Eivor was here to find out. rat's challenge. The young rat truly was the people's king. A fitting reward for winning the tournament, Redgi was presented with the king's key. It's a good thing Doug had eventually found it, as Redgi had been sorely tempted to break the lock himself. But as they say, curiosity kills the rat. The king's chamber smelled of fresh lilac and gooseberries, while the bed glistened with crisp silk sheets. Strangely, a slight breeze blew from behind the bookcase. This half-rat, half-frog abomination must have been the work of his father. Redgi wondered whether this was the source of all the undead in the crypts. Another of King Rattus' secrets, best kept hidden. Redgi was greeted by the squirrel guide Zazu at the forest edge. She'd been sent to show the king the way to the festival, a secret path known only by squirrel folk. The forest was not at all what the young king expected. He'd heard the bright fir's golden leaves bathed the entire forest in light. There'd been no mention of these giant mushrooms that made the air heavy with spores. The bright fir's golden light fell on the forest clearing and caravans like an enchantment. The mood, though, was not festive, but worried. Zazu, embarrassed, explained the reason they asked the brave young king here was to plead for his help. The squirrel elder and a priest of the bright fir journeyed to the abandoned glimmer mines to harvest bright moss, and had not returned. With the golden light of the camp behind him, Redgi headed back out into the gloom in search of the mines. Signs were not promising. Outside the glimmer mines were vicious beetles. What had driven them from their cave home? The squirrel folk were in more danger than they knew. The squirrel elder's walking cane lying abandoned. If he didn't have it, Redgi wondered, how did he carry himself from this place? The rocks of the glimmer mines glowed with a blue light unlike anything Redgi had ever seen. Redgi wondered what the moles would make of this place. The squirrel elder's lifeless body lay on the floor, with the priest at his side. Before Redgi could approach, he found out why they were trapped here. This was the nest of the Beetle Queen. With the beetle queen in her glimmering grave, Redgi approached the still body of the squirrel elder. The squirrel elder rose with a yelp. He'd been entranced from the ritual smoking of extra potent bright moss. Unaware, he almost became the beetle queen's snack. Thanking Redgi for the rescue, they headed back to begin the festival. The squirrel elder back at the bright fir, with a tankard of bright sap in his paw, the festival of Leaf's Fall could finally begin. No sooner had the elder raised his cup into the air to begin his opening speech, came the clattering of wood and smashing of glass. To everyone's horror, a drunken squirrel had knocked over the table with the bright sap. The festival of Leaf's Fall could not continue without the rare and sacred drink. The squirrel elder turned to Redgi, asking if the brave young king would again save their festival and venture into the shrine of the tapped root to collect more bright sap. In the maze of bright fir roots, the spores were so thick Redgi had to wear his gas mask. Was this infestation the reason the bright firs were dying? The shrine of the tapped root stood before him. The root looked damaged. Before Redgi could wonder what it does, he got his answer. A root worm, bloated and enraged by bright sap. Rootworms had been banished from these parts for generations. Redgi had a feeling its presence meant something was rotten in the state of bright fir. To Redgi's dismay, the tap was broken. Redgi did not look forward to returning to the Squirrel Elder with no sacred sap and news of rootworms. were shocked at the news. The squirrel elder had an idea. The tap was one of several made in the basement woodsmith workshop of Castle Dray. Perhaps Redgi could look there. Approaching the ruins of Castle Dray, Redgi's whiskers twitched at the familiar stench on the breeze. He refused to believe it, after all he'd done to be rid of them. It could not be. The frog scourge had returned, a pestilence on the sacred forest that could not be allowed to spread. A slapping of webbed feet from the basement. More pond filth waited below, and would soon feel his blade. The frog squatter was none other than General Hack-Hack, no better than a common thief looting supplies. The only thing he'd be taking today was his last breath. With the satisfaction of the Frog General dead at his paws, Redgi found the replacement tap. The squirrels would have their sacred sap. Redgi was surprised to find a mole in Brightfir Forest. The mole was embarrassed. He'd got lost going from Station C-19 to Station 24/7. Redgi sympathized. Those tunnels were a tough route. Lost he may have been, but still enterprising. The mole had armor for sale, if the king had the coin. The mole had heard of this king of rats who traveled the underground, but never believed it was true. Perhaps Redgi knew the tunnels well enough to give him directions. The king barely noticed the journey back to the Bright Fir, dwelling as he was on the return of frog spawn to the ratdom. Where there's a general, an army must be close by. This market stall sells all sorts of quality goods. A few coins spent here would spruce up the Crimson Keep nicely. Redgi handed over the tap, but wished he could spare the old squirrel the pain of hearing frogs were in Castle Dray. The squirrel elder could not allow the festival to continue, knowing pond scum squatted in their ancestral home. Redgi did not need to be asked. He knew what needed to be done. Redgi could not believe the frogs had returned after all he had done to be rid of them. Pond scum never learn. As Redgi made his way towards the ruins of Castle Dre, the stench of pond scum once again drifted in on the cool breeze. The familiar scent made him wonder why the frogs had suddenly reappeared in the Ratdom.